I personally think Endgame is set on a very specific day, which is the last day of Ham's life. I think there is inside the play a series of routines that have slowly wound down and closed down and been disrupted. But in this particular sequence of events, I feel like it winds to a conclusion, and I think it is a genuine conclusion that it comes to. I think it's quite a simple, humane study, really, in some ways, of the end of an existence. I think Beckett is an important part of the canon and an important part of the lineage of theatrical history because he is at once an innovator, so what he makes has not been really seen before, but it's also in line, it's in continuity with all of the great writings. He communicates through his plays to other works of the canon, particularly Shakespeare. I think there is in Endgame some conversation going on with King Lear. And I think there is in Waiting for Godot a conversation, very detailed conversation going on with Hamlet. And I think that those are plays that are important to the sort of psyche of Western civilization. It got labelled Theatre of the Absurd, which I think is a terrible label. I actually think these ideas that float around in Theatre of the Absurd are unhelpful. The fact is that inside Beckett's universes, and they are slightly other than ours, there is a great deal of consistency. I mean, they are consistent. There are rules, there are patterns, there are life decisions, there are histories. There's as much naturalism inside Samuel Beckett as there is inside Anton Chekhov. But it's not that simple, of course, because it's to do with the poetry of the stories being told. Endgame is a continuation of Waiting for Godot insofar as it's in conversation with Waiting for Godot. I often compare Endgame and Waiting for Godot because I know them both quite well now. Waiting for Godot is really about a group of peers who are all roughly the same age, it's 4 men, and Endgame is about a family. And that's where they are fundamentally different and where the dynamics inside them are very different. And I think there's a development inside Ham and Clov which I think talks to Potso and Lucky. I mean, they're genius characterisations actually, but in the scale of genius, they're not as detailed or as thorough as the characterisations of Vladimir and Estragon. So it's almost like he knew that, and he thought, now I'm going to study this relationship more closely. This is what I think, I could be wrong. And so he's taken that relationship and extrapolated it into Ham and Clov, I think, and then studied it more closely. Beckett is a great comedian. There's all brands of humour inside Beckett. There's slapstick, which is physical comedy. There's wit, which is the well-turned phrase, the witty allusion, the snappy comeback. And then there's, I'll call it clowning, but I don't mean stupid red noses and people who aren't people. They're people, but they're caught out. They're people who are caught out, people in their most awkward moment. We wanted a sense that they were old and that a lot of time had passed and that they'd only had one set of clothing, so they were well worn, and that they were the clothing that they had, the clothing that they were comfortable in, and the clothing that they'd chosen to keep out of other clothes that they left behind. One of the discussions I remember having with Renee, which was sort of instinctive for me, was about the smoking jacket having a kind of yellow, almost acidic-y yellow colour and a blue inside it. I wanted them to be vibrant still, even though they were broken down and scrubbed back. When I was watching the production, and so this is all kind of instinctive if you like, I realised that there was something a bit like a priest's gown in those colours. There's a sort of strange rundown Easter celebration that was going on inside those colours. A kind of slightly spiritual figure inside Ham who was in decay and decline. In the Beckett, I think Nag and Nell are in kind of night clothes, I think. Their dialogue is so beautifully, accurately domestic, and so full of all of the poetry of lost memory and lost time, and I didn't feel like that needed any more hammering out with the costume. I felt like we could actually go one more level away from reality. What we wanted to find was these people that had been stuffed in these bins of toxic poison and how it might have affected the colour of their skin or flaked off their skin. So they have the appearance of being, I suppose, a bit rotten. When you think back over it, they're more like evocations of people rather than actual physical clothed people. Nick Sleeper, the lighting and set designer, and I, we wanted it to feel like it might have existed underneath the set of Waiting for Godot. Set both inside and outside Waiting for Godot. So it's as if a theatre has been in some way bombed out and some trees have grown up in it, and then maybe some new stuff has fallen in and contained it again. Instead of Endgame, it's a sort of bunker and an underneath world, but it's a fabulously inside-out world in that it has windows that he has to ascend to and look out to, and he seems to be able to see the sea on one hand and the earth on the other. So we stretched it as much as we could all the way up into the fly tower, and we narrowed the playing space as much as we could. We knew that there needed to be some movement because there's the movement of the wheelchair, and there needs to be satisfaction for Ham as a character in the movement of that wheelchair. But basically we pulled the space into as tight a space as we could and as thin a space as we could to exaggerate the height, which could also be the depth, to sort of confine the drama and the world. Waiting for Godot is a remarkable play that you sit inside for as an audience member for 2 hours and 45 minutes. And really, if you broke down every line that these people say to each other, the content of it is virtually zero. And yet you're left thinking about God and the universe and the meaning of your life and power and society and how society functions and how baldly society wrestles power. All of this is sprung open in this text, and all of those questions remain in conversation in Endgame and are then refocused, I think, more through the lens of family or through the lens of the sort of funny accidental lens of being stuck together by fate, by life, which gives it a new aspect to the conversation, but it's still the same conversation, or it's of the same conversation.